After a fight, she texted, "I'm moving in with my trainer and we're having a baby." I worked 2 hour shifts as a firefighter to pay $4,180 for her membership only for her to call me vindictive. Later, the trainer sent me a message saying, "Stay in your lane, bro," assuming I was just a broken man. The documentation I handed to the owner made everyone's face turn completely pale. My name is not important. What I do is. I'm a firefighter. 6 years in, 31 years old, and the kind of person who shows up on time, pays his bills, and doesn't make things complicated. I bought my house at 28 3 bedrooms, quiet street, $287,000 mortgage entirely in my name. I worked double shifts for 2 years straight to make that down payment. I'm not telling you that to sound impressive. I'm telling you because it matters later. People like me get described as reliable. Jade used to say it like it was a compliment. For a while, I believed her. Jade was 28 when we met. She called herself a wellness influencer, which in practical terms meant she had 14,000 Instagram followers, a Patreon that brought in around $600 a month, and a lifestyle that cost approximately $4,200 a month to maintain. You can do that math yourself. I did it every month for 19 months and somehow kept coming up with a reason why it was fine. Her gym membership alone was $220 a month. I paid it every single month. I didn't think much about it at the time. It was part of her wellness journey, and I was the kind of guy who supported his partner. That's what I told myself. The engagement happened 14 months in. I picked the ring myself, $3,400, cash, no financing. I proposed at a lake house we rented for the weekend. She said yes before I finished the sentence. I thought that was a good sign. 9 minutes later, she posted it to Instagram. The caption read, "He finally caught up to my frequency." I laughed when I saw it. I thought it was her being playful. I didn't understand until much later that finally was doing a lot of work in that sentence. The 4 months before the text were different, though even now I have trouble explaining exactly how. She was distant in a way that felt busy rather than cold. New vocabulary started showing up: nervous system regulation, energetic alignment, somatic this and that. She came home later. She talked about Remy's classes the way people talk about something that's changing their life. I worked more shifts. I told myself she was going through something and that the right move was to give her space. 4 months before the text, she upgraded to premium coaching at the gym, an extra $180 a month on top of the membership. I paid for that too. I added it to the automatic transfer without asking a single question. That one still sits with me. I should have asked questions. I didn't. And then one Tuesday afternoon, the questions became irrelevant. I read the whole thing once I got home. In the break room, I'd only made it through the first few paragraphs before I put the phone down. But sitting at my kitchen table with the key she'd left on the granite counter sitting right there in front of me, I read all 7 paragraphs straight through. Paragraph 1 said she needed space to grow. Paragraph 2 said she'd been doing deep inner work and had finally started to understand what she needed from life. Paragraph 3 said she was moving in with Remy, that it had happened organically, that it wasn't something either of them planned. Paragraph 4 said Remy saw her at her highest and reflected her truest self back to her. Paragraph 5 said they were expecting a baby and that she was at peace with it. Paragraph 6, and this is the one I keep coming back to, asked me, sincerely, to hold space for her journey. It said she hoped I could find it in my heart to support her growth even if I didn't fully understand it yet. Paragraph 7 said she'd left her key on the counter. 341 words. I know because I counted them later, when I added the screenshot to the receipt folder. At the time, I just sat there for a moment and looked at the key. I didn't call her. I didn't call Remy. I didn't type out the response I could feel forming somewhere in the back of my throat. What I did was pick up the phone and call my buddy Cal at the station and ask him if he could cover my Saturday shift because I had some things to handle at home. Cal asked if everything was okay. I told him yeah, just some admin. It was Tuesday, 2:31 p.m. I had 72 hours before I needed to be back in that firehouse. The key was still sitting on the counter. I looked at it for another second, then I picked up my legal pad and a Sharpie, and I wrote one thing at the top of the first page. Document everything. I had exactly 3 days. I was going to need all of them. The locksmith arrived at 7:15 Tuesday evening. I'd called him from the firehouse parking lot before I even started my truck. New hardware, standard deadbolt, cash payment, $160. While he worked, I stood in the kitchen and opened a new note on my phone. I titled it Receipt Folder. The locksmith finished in 20 minutes. I added his invoice photo to the folder at 7:44 p.m. Jade's key was still in a Ziploc bag on the counter. I'd labeled it with a Sharpie before he arrived. Return to owner. At 6 p.m., she had texted asking to come by and grab a few more things. I didn't respond to that one either. Wednesday morning, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and the legal pad. By 10:30 a.m., I had worked through the list methodically, the way you work a scene isolated, cut off the fuel, don't let it spread. I removed Jade from the joint checking account. Balance at time of removal: $6,200, every cent from my deposits. I canceled her gym membership, $220 a month, 19 payments, $4,180 total, which I wrote in the margin of the legal pad and circled once. I removed her from my car insurance policy. I flagged the engagement ring for insurance documentation. The gym cancellation required an actual phone call. The representative asked me the reason for canceling. I said, "The member is no longer my fiancé." She said she was sorry to hear that. I thanked her and hung up. All 4 confirmation emails went straight into the receipt folder. At 11:17 a.m., a text came in from a number I didn't recognize. It took me about 2 seconds to figure out who it was. "Hey man, no hard feelings. This was always where things were heading. She's good, we're good, stay in your lane, bro." I read it twice. I screenshotted it. I added it to the folder. I did not respond. There was nothing to say to a man who texts "stay in your lane" to someone whose house his girlfriend just moved into. I just let it sit there. The folder was getting full enough. That evening, Jade showed up at 8:45. I know the exact time because the doorbell camera caught it. She rang the bell for 4 solid minutes, which is longer than it sounds. When that didn't work, she started talking through the door loudly enough that I could hear her from the kitchen about how I was being emotionally immature and blocking her healing process. I didn't open the door. I didn't say anything. What ended it was my neighbor, Mrs. White, 73 years old, who opened her front door, looked across the yard, and told Jade in a perfectly even voice that if she wasn't off the property in the next 2 minutes, she was calling the police. Jade left. The camera got 47 seconds of clean audio. I added the clip to the folder before I went to bed. I slept about 4 hours that night. Not because I was upset, because I still had work to do. Thursday morning, I drove to the jeweler. I could have kept the ring. It was legally mine. I bought it. I paid cash. Her name was never on anything. I returned it anyway. Not out of sentiment. I just didn't want it in my house. The jeweler offered me $2,100 as a buyback. I took it without negotiating. Drove straight to a different bank, opened a new account in my name only, and deposited the check. Then I sat in the parking lot with the legal pad and added up everything I had paid exclusively toward Jade's life over 19 months. Gym membership, premium coaching, car insurance, phone bill, the ring, miscellaneous expenses I'd been absorbing without itemizing. The total, written at the bottom of the page in plain numbers, was $11,340. I stared at that number for a moment. Then I circled it and put the legal pad on the passenger seat. That afternoon, I met Cal and Russ at the diner we always go to. I told them what happened in roughly 4 sentences. Cal looked up from his coffee and said, "You changed the lock same day?" I said, "Same evening." Russ said, "Good." And that was essentially the whole conversation for about 30 seconds. Then we ordered food and talked about the upcoming shift rotation. I want to be clear about why I'm mentioning this. It wasn't that they didn't care. It was that they treated the situation exactly the way it needed to be treated, as a practical problem that had been practically handled. Cal asked to see the receipt folder before we left. He scrolled through it for about 15 seconds, handed the phone back, and said, "Message received." I didn't need anything else from that conversation. Friday morning, an unknown number texted me at 9:22 a.m. "Hi, my name is Dana. I think we need to talk. My husband is Remy Calloway." I set the phone face down on the table. I picked it up again. I read it a second time. Then I typed back. "When and where?" We met for coffee that afternoon. Dana was 35, composed in the way that people are composed when they've already done their crying and moved into the operational phase. She set a manila envelope on the table between us, without saying anything, and let me open it. Inside was 11 months of documentation. Dates, names, patterns. Remy had been doing this, systematically identifying female gym members who were emotionally available or financially stable, running the same playbook each time. Jade was entry number 4 on a list that Dana had built carefully and quietly over the better part of a year. She wasn't there to make a scene. She was there to end her marriage, and she needed a corroborating witness for what she was planning. I told her I'd be one. She nodded, closed the envelope, and finished her coffee. I drove home with the legal pad on the passenger seat and Dana's number saved in my phone. Between the two of us, we had everything. Friday evening, I sat at the kitchen table and went through the folder from the beginning. Not because I needed to, because I wanted to know exactly what I had before the weekend. The folder, as of that night, contained the following: Jade's original text full screenshot, 341 words, timestamp 2:14 p.m. Tuesday. Remy's stay in your lane bro message, 11:17 a.m. Wednesday. The locksmith invoice, $160, Tuesday evening. The gym cancellation confirmation 19 months, $4,180 total. The car insurance removal confirmation. The ring buyback receipt, $2,100. The doorbell camera clip, 47 seconds, clean audio, 8:45 p.m. Wednesday. The $11,340 itemized list from the legal pad, photographed and uploaded. Dana's documentation package 11 months, 4 names, corroborated dates and message records, and a screen recording of every message thread between me and Jade, going back to the month she started at Remy's gym. Everything was labeled. Everything was timestamped. Everything was saved to a cloud folder I had titled, simply, Receipt Folder. I had been building it for 4 days. It was the most organized I had ever been about anything in my personal life, which probably says something. I closed the laptop and felt nothing in particular, which also probably says something. An hour later, Jade texted. She was using Remy's number. Her line had been canceled Wednesday along with everything else. The text said she wanted to talk about next steps with the house, that some of her things were still inside and she needed to figure out a plan. What she didn't know was that I had already boxed the remaining items, 2 boxes, taped and labeled, and left them on the front porch that morning. What she also didn't know was that the phone bill she'd been texting me from, for the past 14 months, $85 a month, I wrote it down. $1,190, added to the legal pad, added to the folder, had been canceled on Wednesday at the same time as everything else. She had been using Remy's phone since then without realizing I already knew that. Her text said she hoped we could approach this from a place of mutual respect. I looked at the 2 boxes on the porch through the kitchen window. I typed back, "Steps are right there." Then I put the phone in my pocket and didn't check it again that evening. Dana called at 8 p.m. She was going to the gym Saturday morning peak hours, 9 to 11, when Remy ran his signature group class. She was not going there to fight. She was going there to file a formal complaint with the owner, a woman named Sloan Hargrove, who had built the gym from the ground up and ran it with a written trainer code of conduct that Dana had read in full. Section 4 of that policy prohibited trainers from entering into personal relationships with current clients. Dana had highlighted it. She had printed the documentation packet, dates, names, patterns, 11 months of records, and she was going to hand it to the front desk and request that Sloan review it before making any staffing decisions that week. I asked if she needed me there. She said no. She said my being there would make it look like a personal dispute between 2 men over a woman. She was right. I told her I'd have my phone on. After I hung up, I went to the back porch. I'd been meaning to finish a 6-pack since a barbecue in July and had gotten to exactly 1 can before life got busy. I found the last one in the back of the fridge, brought it outside, and sat down. The night was quiet. The receipt folder was filed. The accounts were closed. The ring was gone. The boxes were on the porch. Everything I could do, I had done. I drank the beer slowly. I went inside at 9:45 p.m. and went to bed. I didn't text Jade back again that night. I didn't need to. The steps were right there. I was awake by 7 Saturday morning. Not from anxiety. I just don't sleep past 7. I made eggs, drank coffee while it was still hot, and sat at the kitchen table with my phone face up. At 8:52 a.m., I texted Dana one word. "Ready?" She replied with a thumbs up. I screenshotted the exchange and added it to the folder. Then I put the phone down and finished my eggs. I want to be clear about why I wasn't going to the gym. It wasn't avoidance. Dana and I had talked through this on the phone Friday night before I went to bed. If I showed up, the whole thing collapsed into a different story: a jealous ex-fiancé confronting the man who replaced him, 2 guys with a grievance, a personal dispute that Sloan Hargrove could reasonably decline to get involved in. Dana's complaint was not personal. It was professional. It was 11 months of documented policy violations by an employee against his own clients, presented formally to the person with the authority to act on it. My presence would have muddied that entirely, so I stayed home. I made a second cup of coffee. I sat on the back porch for a while and thought about nothing in particular. At 8:15 a.m., before Dana's thumbs up had even come in, Jade had already texted from Remy's number. My phone just got shut off. I'm using Remy's. Did you cancel my line? I replied. Yes. She came back fast. That's vindictive. I typed back. It's a phone bill. You can get your own. 3 more texts followed in quick succession, each one a variation on the same argument that I was punishing her, that I was acting out of ego, that I was dysregulating her nervous system by refusing to engage constructively. I read all 3. I did not respond after the second. There was nothing constructive to engage with. She called canceling an $85 phone bill vindictive. I called it a Wednesday decision I hadn't gotten around to telling her about yet. Somewhere across town, Remy was warming up his Saturday class. I knew his schedule because Dana had included it in the documentation package. The boutique gym opened at 6. His signature class, he called it Power Reset, ran from 9 to 10:15. 43 members, most of them regulars, most of them women. He had probably written something on the whiteboard. He had probably made a joke. He had no idea Dana had left the house at 8:30 a.m. with a printed manila envelope and a highlighted copy of Section 4 of Sloan Hargrove's Trainer Code of Conduct. He had no idea the gym cancellation I'd called in on Wednesday had been logged in the system under his client records. He had no idea about any of it. And I found, sitting there on the back porch with my second cup of coffee, that I didn't feel triumphant about that. I just felt very calm. The one thing that could go wrong was simple. Dana's complaint goes nowhere. Sloan sides with her highest earning trainer, files it away, nothing changes officially. Remy and Jade spin it as harassment. The whole thing becomes noise. I had sat with that possibility on Friday night and made my peace with it, because everything I needed I had already taken care of myself. The locks were changed. The money was safe. The accounts were closed. The ring was gone. The receipts were filed. Whatever happened at that gym in the next 2 hours was Dana's story to finish. I had already finished mine. I had done my part. What happened next wasn't up to me anymore. I was on the back porch when the first text came in. 10:22 a.m. Cal. Bro. You need to check in with your friend Dana. I read it twice, set the phone down, and waited. Dana's gym, Sloan Hargrove's boutique studio, ran its Saturday Power Reset class from 9 to 10:15. Mirrored walls, hardwood floors, 41 members that morning. Remy taught it the same way every week. He'd write something on the whiteboard at the front of the room before class, some motivational line that set the tone. That Saturday the whiteboard read, Power Reset, be present, be honest, show up for yourself. He'd probably written it at 8:30, right around the time Dana was pulling out of their driveway with a manila envelope on the passenger seat. She walked in at 9:07 a.m., while the class was in its second rotation. The front desk was staffed by a young woman named Rin. Dana didn't ask for Remy. She asked for Sloan Hargrove. She set the envelope on the desk and said, I need her to see this before she makes any staffing decisions this week. Rin took it back to the office. Sloan came out 6 minutes later. What happened in those 6 minutes, Dana told me afterward. Sloan sat at her desk and read through the documentation packet in full. 11 months. 4 names. Dates that matched gym access logs. Message records. A pattern that was not ambiguous once you saw it laid out in chronological order. Sloan had built that gym herself. She had written the trainer code of conduct herself, including Section 4, which prohibited trainers from entering into personal relationships with current clients. She had hired Remy 14 months ago on the strength of a reference and a clean record. She read to the end of the packet, set it down, and walked out of her office. She told Rin to pause the class. Remy was mid-sentence when the music stopped. He turned around and saw Sloan walking across the floor toward him. 41 people watched him smile, the easy, reflexive smile of a man who assumes the interruption is logistical. He said something like, "Everything good?" Sloan said she needed to suspend him from instruction pending a formal review of a complaint that had been filed that morning. His smile didn't move right away. He asked who had filed it. Sloan said she wasn't at liberty to discuss that. And that's when Remy made the mistake that defined the rest of his morning. He looked past Sloan toward the front of the room, saw Dana standing near the door, and said, loud enough for the class to hear. My wife is a little emotional right now. This is a private matter. We can handle this outside. Dana didn't raise her voice. She didn't move from where she was standing. She said, "It stopped being private when entry number 4 moved into our house." The room went quiet, the way rooms go quiet when something real has just been said out loud. Several members had their phones out. This was a boutique fitness studio in 2024, not a sealed room. Remy said something about context, about things being more complicated than they appeared, about Dana not having the full picture. Dana reached into her bag, took out a second copy of the documentation packet, and held it up. 11 months, she said. Pick a date. Remy stopped talking. Sloan looked at Dana. She said, "I'll take it from here." She turned to Remy and told him his access card would be deactivated by end of day pending the outcome of the review. Then she walked back to her office. Remy stood in the middle of the hardwood floor, with 41 people looking at him and a whiteboard behind him that said, "Be present, be honest. Show up for yourself." Dana handed the second packet to Ren at the front desk, said, "For your records," and walked out. I got her text at 10:47 a.m. "It's done." Sloan suspended him pending review. "He's off the floor. The packet is filed." I read it on the back porch. I put the phone face down on the table. I picked up my coffee. I sat there for a while. At 11:15 a.m., a text came in from Remy's number, the same number that had sent "Stay in your lane, bro" 4 days earlier. It said, "What did you do?" 2 words, no punctuation, no capitalization. I read it once. I thought about typing "message received." I looked at those 2 words on my screen for a moment. Then I deleted them without sending. She didn't deserve the words. He didn't either. I put the phone in my pocket and went inside to make another cup of coffee. At 11:30 a.m. I sent one message. Not to Jade. Not to Remy. To a lawyer contact I'd had in my phone for 2 years and never needed until now. I attached the $11,340 figure from the legal pad and asked about the formal process for recovering documented shared expenses from a dissolved domestic partnership. He replied within the hour. That was the only message I sent that morning. I didn't text her back. I texted my lawyer. The formal review completed 10 days later. Remy was removed from the trainer roster. Dana filed for divorce the same week. Jade's Instagram went private 3 days after the gym, the wellness journey, the highest timeline, all of it, gone behind a locked profile. 2 members who had been in the Saturday class left reviews of the gym, mentioning issues with trainer professionalism. They didn't name Remy. They didn't have to. Sloan issued an updated trainer code of conduct within the month. I learned all of this from Cal, who knew one of the Saturday regulars, and from Dana, who texted me a single line when the review concluded. "It's official." I replied, "Good." The gym's Google rating dropped 0.3 stars. I found that mildly interesting and mostly irrelevant to my daily life. I tore the legal pad page out the following Tuesday, the $11,340 list, the circled number, the margins full of dates and amounts. I folded it once and put it in the drawer next to the kitchen table. Not because I needed it, because it was accurate. The lawyer said the recovery process would take time. I told him I wasn't in a hurry. That night I went to bed at 10. I woke up at 6. 8 hours. Straight through, no interruptions, no 3 a.m. ceiling staring, no low-level dread sitting on my chest like something I couldn't name. Just sleep, and then morning. I made eggs. I drove to the firehouse. It was a good shift, no major calls, steady pace, the kind of day where nothing goes wrong and you come home the same way you left. I drank my coffee hot. I sat in the break room at the same table where I'd read that text 11 days earlier, and I thought about how different a room can feel depending on what you're carrying into it. First time in 4 months I slept through the night. Turns out the weight wasn't the situation, it was the person I kept carrying it with.